Hello everyone and welcome back to the Workbench. This is a series of videos where I discuss ceiling fan history and trivia and information. Information? That's not what I normally say. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Workbench. This is a series of videos where I discuss ceiling fan history and trivia and technical information. So, today is kind of an update of sorts, and it's kind of a new topic. We're going to talk about the various model names that Emerson used to sell ceiling fans from the early 70s through to the early 80s, which is kind of the golden years for collectors, you know. Not the antique stuff, long noses and all that, and not into the 90s with the TriStar and the pedal and the models, some of which I really like. So, got a nice little heat fan here on the Workbench for a prop. So let's get into it. Emerson was using the term Casablanca to describe their fans since the summer of 1974. The first fan to use Casablanca in the name was a 36-inch 4-blade blender fan with the pull chain out the center. And in 75 and 76, same thing. The Emerson Casablanca was a 36-inch blender with the pull chain out the center. In 1976, they first show up the CF523L, which is the version with the housing. It's still referred to as the Casablanca. 77, 79, 1980, all their ads show blender fans still called the Casablanca. So, when does the term heat fan appear? Now, we have seen evidence of it as early as 74, but in terms of advertisements and public product literature, it first shows up in 76. It is called the Chromalox Heat Fan. In 77, the blender fan shows up called the Casablanca with the switch housing. It's also the first time that a 52-inch blender fan is called the Casablanca. In 77, it is also called the Emerson-Chromalox Heat Fan. In 78, it is the Emerson Heat-Fan with a trademark. In 78 also is when the term Casablanca is applied to friction drives. 79 and 80, again, more friction drives called Casablanca. The term Casablanca Classic, which was their first fan with a all-metal housing, was introduced in the summer of 79. Also introduced in late 79, early 1980 is the Emerson LeFan, which is the little spinner with the import cast motor and blender fan parts. By 81, Emerson is still using the term Casablanca to refer to both friction drive fans and the Casablanca Classic, which later became the Premium. 81 is also an important year, and it's the reason why I picked a heat fan as the prop, even though it's not the correct version of the heat fan. 81 is when they introduced something called the Heat Fan 3, Roman numeral III, Roman numeral 3. That's the model HF352. If you know anything about blender fans, HF152 is the Dan blender. It is this version, 52 being a 52-inch version. And then when they moved to the K55 motor, it became the 352. And it's a little curious because normally they switched from K63 to K55 and they didn't change the model number. But when they went from K63 to K55 for the 3-blade heat fans, they changed the model number from 152 to 352, and that's so they could promote it as the all-new Heat Fan 3. And the only difference was the motor. 1981 was the last year Emerson was using the term Casablanca ceiling fan in reference to their fans, which makes sense because the lawsuit with Casablanca all culminated in 80 and 81. Okay, so let's talk about Emerson Universal series, and occasionally also showed up as Casablanca Universal. That all showed up in 1981. The Casablanca Universal appears to be a 4-blade blender fan with the transhaft pull chain, a 4-blade switch housing blender, and the version with the housing and the round vents. In 81, the Emerson fan lines were the Casablanca Designer, the Casablanca Classic, and the Casablanca Universal, which was the blender fan. So again, they stopped using Casablanca Ceiling Fan in 81, but they continued to use the terms Casablanca Classic and Casablanca Designer all the way through 84. After 84, no more Casablanca, period. Emerson patented the KB55 in 83, and they refiled the patent in 86. The LeFan, the little spinner, was sold through 83 on clearance in 84. The Universal series, the blender fan, and again, I can't remember if I mentioned this, and I think we talked about it in the blender fan video. So the Universal series was when it was marketed residentially. The Heat Fan was when it was marketed commercially, and the Universal series always had plastic blades, and I believe always had a plastic canopy. Universal series was sold through 83. Emerson actually patented a kit for making their non-reversible fans reversible in 84. 85, again, no trace of Casablanca in any of their advertising after that point. Emerson also patented their close mount kit in 1985. So, those are all the Emerson updates that I have. That covers pretty much the sequence of all the models they sold from 74 to 85, which again, we didn't talk about the 1895 series, but that was the big introduction around then. And that's when things started to change for Emerson. Maybe we'll cover that in a future video. I don't know. There's quite a lot to talk about for Emerson for the rest of the 80s and then into the 90s. I also want to, for lack of a better way to put it, shout out the end of Emerson. It appears that their fan line is finally being discontinued, which is really sad for a lot of us that collect fans. Emerson is my favorite fan company. I have more Emerson fans installed and in my collection than any other brand over the years that I've collected. And even in their recent years, the premium was always one of my favorite models, so I'm very sad to see them go. So hopefully we'll cover a lot more Emerson content in these videos going forward. But for today, I just wanted to kind of refresh on all the model information, both stuff that had to do with the blender fan timeline and stuff that was ancillary from that. So, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring notification bells, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is a series of videos where I discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. So this video is part update and part new content. We did a video on the timeline of the Emerson Heat-Fan, aka the blender fan. And what we're going to cover in this video is the timeline of all the model names they used during that same time period. So, as you may know from that video, the Heat Fan was introduced by no particular name in the early 60s, and then by the Heat Fan name in 74, and then that name was essentially discontinued with the Stratojet, although they did continue to use it. Let's start over. Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is a series of videos where we discuss ceiling fan history and trivia and technical information. This video is part update and part new content. We did a video on the history of the timeline for the Emerson blender fan, which is the collector term for these because they look like a blender with blades on the bottom, known by Emerson as the Heat Fan, the Casablanca, and the Universal series. So I thought since blender fans alone were known by all those names, it would be a good idea to go over the timeline of all the names that Emerson used for all their models during that time period. So starting in the 60s, which is when this type of fan was introduced, up until about 85, which is when we're done with that style of Emerson fan and going into the 1895 series and the Stratojet, which we will theoretically cover in future videos. So, the first name by which Emerson sold ceiling fans of this type was calling them the Casablanca. And that name first shows up in 1974. It is a 36-inch version of this fan with the pull chain out the center and 4 blades. No different in 75. In 76, the CF523L shows up, which is the blender fan with the plastic housing. There's one in the front of my garage, several in my videos. We call them a shrouded blender. Some people call them a kitchen fan for reasons passing understanding. That shows up in 76, also called the Casablanca. In 76 also, from now, is when... Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is the series of videos where we discuss ceiling fan technical data, trivia, and history. This video will serve as both an update and new content. We did a video some weeks ago about the Emerson blender fan and the timeline of this style of Emerson fan from the 60s through the mid-80s. In this video, we're going to cover that I don't like how I'm talking. Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. These are the videos in which I don't know what I'm saying. Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is the video series where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. This video will be both an update as well as some new content. We had a great video about the history of the Emerson blender fan and the various changes over the years to this style of Emerson fan. So in the video today, we're going to talk about all the different model names that Emerson used for all the fans that they sold over that same time period. So basically the 70s through the mid-80s. So in 1974 is the first year where Emerson is calling their ceiling fans by any particular name, and they are calling them the Casablanca. This predates Casablanca Fan Company, does not predate A&G Machinery, but that's another video. So in 74, they're selling their ceiling fans as the Casablanca, and it is a 36-inch fan with a K63 motor, 4 blades, and a pull chain out of the center. Same in 75. In 76, the version with the motor housing shows up. All the ones I've seen have the model number CF523L. Those are also sold as the Casablanca. And this is the first year that in public documentation they're calling the version that sold commercially in industry. God, I was doing so well!